Today's a lot of fun. I'm honored to have this individual on. This is Dan Watt. If you guys don't know Dan, I'll leave all of his information below. He's the producer and director of the award-winning documentary Everybody Dance, which, as I'm recording this right now, is currently on iTunes, Apple TV, and is free on Amazon Prime during the month of March. He also was the associate producer on the online documentary Wild Ride. So definitely follow him if you get a chance. But today was a fun chat. We talk about his experience and his new film. So everyone, please help me welcome Dan Watt.
My stepson had a child, but I am not old enough to be a grandfather, so I go by Uncle Dan. So
Nice. That's a good move on your part, sir.
I'm a new uncle.
Yeah, my father has been waiting years for this day to call himself grandfather, so he's excited. And speaking of which, by the way, we're recording. I did your intro prior to this. Thank you for being on.
Just put hair out of my mouth, so that'll be nice.
I'll cut that part out. No, but thank you for coming on. You know, I think we first chatted on Threads. Was it Threads or Instagram? Yeah,
I think Threads. Yeah.
Yeah, which I'm really loving that platform. We'll talk about that in a sec. But I was looking through your page, and I must say, speaking of having a newborn, so I started your film, Everybody Could Dance, the first couple of minutes, and then last night, and then I had to deal with my baby. So it's on the watch list tonight. I will say though, I appreciate it because it's I watched the trailer and I was really moved by it. And even if we didn't connect on Threads, I'm just excited to have you not only on, but also hopefully we could talk about your film a little bit more. And I'm going to continuously kind of spread your messaging because the way the film started off, it's I can already tell it's going to be a moving piece. So, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to finish a film since my baby's been born, which is unfortunate. I used to be such a film buff, and we used to watch like 2 or 3 movies a night. But now I can't even get like I can't get through an episode of Modern Family. So it's just it's crazy. But congratulations on the film, though.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I think the title "Everybody Dance." I don't want audiences to shy away from it because of the word dance, that they think, oh, dance is not for me. The dance is the through line of the movie because these kids all take at the same dance studio called Ballet for All Kids. But you'll see as you watch it that it is, it's a movie of self-discovery. It's self-identity, camaraderie, family, friendship, all those things are revealed in the movie. And one of the kids says a line that just touched my heart, and he's talking to his mom, and he says, "I don't feel I fit in at school, but I do fit in ballet class." And that just, you're like, whoa, you know.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And, I think now, especially as as social media becomes more and more prevalent to the younger generation, which is kind of terrifying to me as a new father, we're going to do what we can to keep her away from the device. But unfortunately, every parent has to be on board with that decision for it to work. So, because, I even did a video about this the other day where it's hard to be that parent. Just like it is for a lot of things, because we can't control typically what they do in school. We could try, but kids are very, especially the popular kids, they have a lot of influence on the other kids. So it's hard to be a kid, because I was that kid that didn't fit in for a lot of reasons, and it's always hard to watch and to hear kids going through that type of thing. And I think with social media becoming more and more popular, it's so hard because we always think the grass is always greener. It's like, how come I can't run like that person? How come I can't be like that person or look like this person? It's hard, man. It's, and again, I'm almost 40. Since you're not a grandfather, we won't go over your age.
Right.
But
I'm a little older than that. I'll give you a little.
Thank you. But I would imagine, we could both relate to the situation of we weren't raised in school with the idea of worrying about those outside influences. And because it's even hard enough just in school, blocking those influences, let alone having thousands of people have an opinion of you. And unless you could unless you could teach your kid the values of not worrying about what other people think, that's very difficult. It's very difficult to talk about that.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's an interesting discussion to have, but and also to live. Like you said, I had my journey through life has been crazy. So many twists and turns in my road. But I started out as a dancer when I was 15.
Hmm.
I was cast in the freshman. Only the freshmen can only be in the spring fling, which was the variety show. So they put me in the spring fling, and I had this natural rhythm for dance. I knew I always wanted to be in show business and I knew I loved dancing, and I took it so far in my mind that I was going to be the third dancer from the left on the Carol Burnett show. I mean, I knew height wise that was going to be where I would end up, the third one from the left, not knowing the woman that I adored would retire and stop the show before I was even out of school. I mean,
She did.
you don't think of
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
You're watching the show and you're like, I'll right there. That's where I'll go right there. And you're like, what do you mean she canceled the show? And she's
She didn't even give you a chance, Dan.
exactly. I knew I would win her over at the audition.
Yeah,
But it was interesting because being a gay man, but not knowing what that term was back then,
sure.
but I I was good enough as a performer and a dancer that I got jobs outside of school
Mm,
and would get paid and also would get excused from school to do those shows. So the kids in school didn't know what to do with me. They were like, yeah, but we saw him like on the news and there's that newspaper article, but did we call him a name? What are we going to do with like Danny Watt is what they called me. What are we going to do
yeah,
with Danny Watt? Because, he is kind of, they know him in Cleveland. I don't know what to do. So I was lucky that I didn't get harassed much in school.
mm,
But I was also able to follow my dreams at such an early age outside of school and in the community, and find people, like-minded people, creative people,
yeah,
dancers, actors, theater people, movie people, all out there.
sure.
So I was lucky to have that family to fall back on.
Yeah,
I mean, I had my own parents too, and they didn't stop me and anything like that, but I didn't have to deal with feeling like an outsider at school, even though I did. So what I did is I went outside. So I
sure.
didn't go outside.
Yeah, and what would you say attributed to that? I mean, because you mentioned your parents. I mean, I assume they were very supportive of your decision to jump right into dance and go into it. Were they recommending classes to you to get out and reach people? Like what was that process, or was it a struggle?
No, it wasn't a struggle. I think they didn't know what to do with me. So they just were like, "Okay."
Let him do his
I
thing.
also had the ability, or I don't know if it's an ability, but I would stay up till like 1 in the morning. And this is like in, 5th and 6th grade. I would watch The Tonight Show, and I would watch, there was that show where I saw like Tina Turner and all these amazing people, some midnight show, something like that.
Yeah,
Wasn't Midnight Express, but something like that.
yeah,
So you get to see the Rolling Stones and all these people, and they were like, "Shouldn't you be in bed?" And I'm like, "But I'm not tired.
right.
I'm not tired." So they would just like, "Okay, well, go to bed when you're tired, but you're still getting up at 6 o'clock to go to school." And I did.
Yeah.
So it was interesting, but they also studied ballroom, and they also took me to shows at Playhouse Square in Cleveland, and then I got a job there. So I think
Oh wow.
they were involved in it. Um, when your mom takes you to go see Lola Falana and you're, 13 years old, but you saw her on, and you might not even have any idea who I'm talking about,
Mm-mm.
but she was on the Merv Griffin show, and she was just this amazing, amazing singer who has since retired. And I just fell in love with her. And then they let me go see Tina Turner down there, and that was during her disco era. So this was before you all fell in love with her on, Simply the Best. I
Right.
have the albums from before then, so back off. I'm her number one fan. You know, Oprah can step aside. Yeah, you
Yeah.
like, yeah, you know, I have the disco album. Until
Nice.
you have that one, I don't want to hear it.
You're not a true fan. Yeah.
Right. So they just let me explore. So I think that was a great
That's great.
thing,
Yeah.
you know.
And yeah, it doesn't happen a lot, right? I mean, with parents, I was very fortunate as well to have, parents that that pretty much let me creatively do what I want and pursue passions that I wanted to. And I think that's a big reason why I would imagine anyway. It's hard for someone, a kid anyway nowadays, to kind of look at a phone and have those critical thinking skills to say, I could be this person on the other side of the phone, but instead we choose to be the dreamer instead of the doer.
Right.
And I think that's maybe it's because there's too much information. So it's almost overwhelming to the point to like, you ever been to like the Cheesecake Factory? Do you guys have those
Yeah.
here? You go there,
Not often because the menu's too big.
thank you. Yeah, it's horribly huge to the point to where you get there and you're like, this is too much. I don't even want to, I'll just order cheesecake. I don't even want
Right.
a meal. It's too much to work. And I feel like that's how a lot of younger people feel now, where it's like there's too many job options, there's too many things creatively I could do, there's so many things. I just would rather be here as the viewer scrolling on my phone than actually be the person that people are watching. It's
Well,
almost like it's too much, versus like our day was, you could be that individual because there was really no comparing. It was like you just did what you wanted to do, what you felt was right, and you ended up doing it, and no one could judge you because there wasn't the internet. So,
right.
there was
And
no judgment there.
and I must say, thank God for
Yeah.
just
For
saying.
for us all, Dan. Yeah, for us
Yeah.
all.
But I also think that because as my career progressed, I became a dance teacher and a choreographer, and I actually was the department head of a conservatory out here in California. And it was my job to put together the musical theater, dance, drama department, and put their shows together. And I started seeing the influence, not as much, with some of the social media, but also with parents giving their children too many options.
Mm,
And I think you, in the beginning and in their younger days, yeah, let them try tennis, let them try track, let them play piano. I would say make them play piano. I think everybody should for at least a year,
yeah,
and have them take dance and soccer, whatever their thing is. But then there has to become a time when you narrow it down
that's right.
because they are just exposed exactly what you're saying. They have too many things, and they haven't had to have that conversation with themselves. And what my mom and dad did when I started taking dance in Cleveland, again, I was 15, so I had to catch up. But I was one of the only boys in Cleveland who did dance, and I happened to be recommended to the best teacher out there, Dee Hillier, who came from New York, who studied with the top jazz dancers. So
Wow.
she was their students and worked with them. So I was getting firsthand best knowledge. But my mom and dad said, we can only afford 3 classes a week, so the rest is up to you.
Mm,
So then it comes down to, okay, I need to catch up. I need to take 5 to 6 classes a week. So how do I do that? So then talking to Dee, it was, okay, well, you can be my assistant on Monday. So I'm then actually learning more of a teaching side because I'm the one in the front and everybody's watching me, the beginners. So I didn't know it at the time, but it exposed me to that side of a dancer's career, the teaching side, but also the pressure of, oh my gosh, all these beginners are watching me, so I need to do it right. So you
mhm,
focus more. But then it was, okay, well, for the Tuesday class, why don't you stay after class and sweep the floor, clean the mirrors, and clean the bathrooms?
mm,
And and then it was, okay, well, I guess I have to babysit on Saturday nights because I have to pay for the 3 classes I took on Saturday. So when you have to make critical decisions and decisions on what you want to do because it's not just handed to you. And I think that was a great thing, that my parents made me do. And maybe they could have afforded more. But I loved that I had to earn it because I think you appreciate it more. And then you also have to have that conversation in your head with yourself.
That's right.
Do I want to? And back then, I didn't go to a birthday party on a Saturday because that was advanced jazz. Plus, I was in the company and that was company rehearsal. You
Wow.
don't miss, if you miss class, you're out of the number. You're
Yeah.
not performing. And then what I was saying about teaching at the conservatory is when these kids, we would have rehearsal on Saturday for a musical we were doing, and I would get a note on Friday night from one of the mothers saying, "Oh, Kelly won't be there tomorrow. She has a birthday party to go to." And I'm like,
Mm,
"Yeah, but she's the stepsister in Cinderella." And I'm like, "Well, I guess she's no longer the stepsister." And I had to,
right.
and parents don't like that fight,
Mm,
and I said, "Well, this was the agreement ahead of time. 8 weeks
mhm.
rehearsal on Saturdays, and she's turning down rehearsal. She's not just letting herself down by not being there and learning this stuff, but she's letting the entire cast down. And she needs to know that, and that by making this decision to go get cake, this is what's going to happen, you
Yeah.
know? And I don't
Well,
know if kid parents do that these days.
yeah, I mean, there's a level of responsibility that I don't think we hold our kids to. And me and my wife were talking about this the other day, where I don't necessarily think it's because there's, lack of a better word, worse parents than what there was when we were growing up. I just think there is, like the Cheesecake Factory, there's so many things to do. Specifically, I was talking to this with my father, where it's like, as I'm raising our daughter, it seems like there's not enough time in the day. I used to do so many things, and then I talk to my parents, and then people in that older generation, and they go, "How come you don't have enough fucking time to see us, to do this?" And I go, "I honestly don't have the answer. I don't know." And they're like, "Well, when you were being raised," and then it really got me thinking. I'm like, why is that? Why is it that they maybe spend more time, when I was a kid with their parents, right, with my grandparents?
Right?
I remember doing Sunday dinners and I remember doing all these things a lot and having a lot of family time. And it seemed like they had a lot of free time. And without putting an excuse on it, I just think it's because we, this generation, the millennials, we have so much going on. We're working harder to make the same amount of money. We're a little bit more stressed, whether that's financially or, again, going back to social media. We feel the stress of social media, so we're maybe a little bit more exhausted. We're also focused more on fitness this generation and health and wellness and well being. So maybe we're spending more time working out, going to the gym, running, jogging, whatever it is. So we're kind of spending a little bit more time versus my father and his before. All they did was they woke up, they went to work, they came back home. They didn't really talk to anybody because there was no way to communicate with people all the time. But the free time that I do have, whether I'm scrolling on my phone or I'm FaceTiming a buddy in California, like I'm actually doing a lot more things. And that's when it kind of hit me to where, oh, that's why it doesn't feel like there's enough time in a day, because I am doing a lot. And when I'm not doing a lot, I'm kind of exhausted from doing so much. So I just want to sit back and scroll aimlessly on my phone. And
Yeah.
that's probably not the best thing to do, but that's the energy level because you've done so much and you're so drained. Because I think the weight of all these other humans are kind of on you all day, whether that's with work or social media. And then you just are exhausted. And that's definitely not a good thing. And I think that's why stress levels are high, anxiety is high. People got to be on medication all the time. It's just there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of and when you can learn to kind of block all that out, and this all circles back to what we're talking about, which is when you can find what you're passionate about in your creativity, I think it solves a lot of problems because you spend less time doing all the bullshit that's kind of pointless, and you spend
Right.
more time kind of focusing on what you really, really love. And when you do that, it doesn't seem like it's, you're not wasting time, right? You're doing things that you love and you're spending time doing these things.
And I
So,
think also, putting putting time in your calendar for you and for your family, because our Sunday dinners, almost every Sunday, we went after church to my mom's mom and dad's for lunch,
mm,
and then to my dad's mom and dad's for dinner. So it was like this loop, and then we went home, and that was just. what it was going to be. And my mom and dad moved to California before me. And my dad said, "You are still going to do this on Sundays. This is now your responsibility."
Yeah.
So I would go once a month, not every week.
Sure.
But we're now developing that same thing with my stepson and his wife. So my partner and my husband and I guess, go over there on Sundays for dinner. And either they'll cook or we'll cook. He's actually in the kitchen now. We're actually doing it tomorrow, this week,
Yeah.
but we've adjusted our schedule to do that. But I
Sure.
also think, and I think you get this because one thing that you had with your whiteboard, your erase board,
Oh yeah.
with the things you need to do.
Yeah.
I do that, but I actually use Post-its and put them on my computer because it works for me, because visually, after I finish something, I throw it away. So I then have the visual part where, oh, there's no Post-its on my computer. I've done everything, and I need to do that. I need to write them the night before so I can sleep through the night and not wake up most of the time. But then my list is there, and then you can look at it and you go, "You know what? I really don't need to do this tomorrow. This can actually go to the next day. It's
That's
not
right.
urgent, but this is what I need to do tomorrow." You know,
Yeah.
and I also think that there are more people like you and me out here who are self-employed, at least now. I also come from a corporate world like you did.
Yeah.
I worked for Columbia Pictures for 5 years, and then I worked for Simon Cowell for 5 years. So
Wow.
I got amazing, amazing training to make
Yeah.
this film. Um, and but it wasn't right for me anymore.
That's right.
When I learned as much as I wanted to learn there, but also my life, I wanted to go in a different direction. Like I always loved real stories and true stories,
Hmm.
and used to come home after school and watch Phil Donahue and Merv Griffin, and I didn't put this together till later when Morgan Spurlock, the documentary director, worked with me on the One Direction movie. The band One Direction was
Yeah.
the first with Simon Cowell, and we followed them for a year on tour when
Oh
they
wow.
first started. But Morgan was the director. So when I decided to become an independent producer, he kind of held my hand through this entire thing, as I would be crying in my living room on the floor in a ball going, "What did I do?"
What is happening?
And he's like, "Okay, you done?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Okay, now get up and go to work." And I'm like, "Well, that wasn't nice." Aren't you supposed to hold me a little longer?
Yeah.
You know,
That's so
I'm not
funny.
done complaining.
Yeah.
Um, but to there a lot of jobs like my dad had, and in construction, and my grandfather, in Cleveland, everybody worked in one of the car industries. It was either Ford or
Sure.
Chevy, and my dad's dad worked for one, and my mom's mom worked I mean, my mom's dad worked for the other.
Yeah.
Those jobs don't exist as much as they used to. So they
Hmm.
would get up, go to work, and then come home. Their job was to make the money to pay for the family, and
That's right.
that's all it was. Where then we now are a little more creative and have a little more freedom because of what they did. It gave us the freedom to think outside the box, to do, you're working at home to spend more time with your kids. I decided, the commute, a 3-hour commute to work for Simon Cowell, wasn't worth it, you
Yeah.
know.
And
Um,
you got the experience obviously that you needed, and you're grateful for that. Same thing with me. I mean, the what I learned in the corporate world, and who knows? I mean, I've thought about getting back into it, in some capacity, because I've been offered so many jobs, but I'm just like, I'm just having so much fun being creative, but it's, you know, eh, I'm not making 200K like I used to. You know what I mean? Like there's
mhm.
that's the payoff, but then also it's like, do I want to cherish these moments and make a little bit less and be able to spend time with my baby girl as
Right.
she grows up? So there is kind of like that devil's advocate that kind of goes through my head, to where it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it's good on one side, but it's not. But then also too, I think you learn more, very similar to like when I was a kid, and I also did another video on this where I would go outside and using your imagination and being creative and coming up with stupid games and doing
Right.
this stuff, I feel like you grow more cognitively that way, um, than maybe sitting at home playing video games. And
Right.
I relate that kind of analogy to working for yourself, where I feel like I'm learning more and I'm kind of growing as a human being, working for myself, making a little bit less money, being more frugal, spending more time with my daughter, but just being home, working through my own shit and
Mhm.
trying to put out the best content I possibly can. And I feel like that's better for me long term than
Mhm.
working for a job that maybe I don't like, maybe might lay me off in a couple of years, might go
Right.
bankrupt. Like who knows, right? Like there's a lot of bad things that can happen and have happened to me, which is why I've worked for myself. But um I feel like everybody should have that journey of don't quit your job and work for yourself.
Right.
But but have that journey of figuring out what you want to do and try to pursue it internally on your own. And just explore that creativity, because I think you grow as a human being and you learn a lot that way.
And I also think that everything, my entire career and journey led me to
Mm,
this making this film because starting out as a dancer, going to New York, to audition and then realizing, "Oh, I don't sing." And because when I first started going to New York to take classes, like 42nd Street was there, and, a chorus line is pretty much the one that changed it, but there were actors, there were dancers, and there were singers in a
mm,
musical. Well, then with a chorus line, even though they had the big chorus in the back, they learned that you can have the triple threat, the person that sings, dances, and acts.
that's
And
right.
since I can only sing 3 notes on key, that didn't work. I wasn't a triple threat, so I made the decision to come to Hollywood, during the beginning of Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson. I thought I'll be one of their backup dancers and in the videos and stuff. So that led me out here, and then I didn't have the right look. I went to an audition for Janet Jackson, and they said, "Thank you for coming." And they didn't even watch me dance. So I stayed, and I got up at like 3 in the morning to be there at 5 in the morning for the audition that started at 7 in the morning.
Wow.
So I knew it was just my physical look, and I thought, "Well, what is this?" And I waited until 10:30 at night for one of the producers who sat behind the audition table, and I said, "You need to tell me." I said, this is like the third one I've auditioned for, Janet, and I don't even get to dance." And I'm like, "I busted my ass and I can do 4 pirouettes on both legs. And most people have one side." And I said, "I busted my ass and you don't even know that." And she said, "Well,
Yeah.
first of all, you need to know this is video. You only need to do one and we'll just edit it in." And I was like, poof.
Wow.
I was like, "No." But she said, "Do you want to know the truth?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, your face is too masculine for what we're going for." And then I'm
Mm,
going, "Did you hear me? Did you meet me?" I go up quite a few octaves,
yeah.
and but
That's
they were
just the
going
industry, right?
it was an asexual look that they were going for at that time.
Mm,
Androgynous, and I have a very strong forehead and chin, and that never entered my mind because film is here and stage is over there.
right.
So stage
Right.
gives you a depth. So that was a huge eye opener for me. But then I didn't stop. I thought, okay, with this information, what do I do? Okay, audition for dance companies because
Mm,
they want dancers who are trained. And then I got into dance companies. So my career, I tried this, got the answer I didn't like the answer, but it was thank God she told me the truth because then I knew where to go from there.
right.
And then after that, I started getting hired to choreograph stuff. And I'm like, well, I've danced with the Joffrey Ballet. I've done Romeo and Juliet with, 54 people on stage. I guess I can choreograph Oklahoma,
Mm.
you
Right,
know.
right, right, right.
So
Yeah, and
I
it's
did that, and then they were like, "Well, you want to direct?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because that guy sucks." you know.
and then
you know.
did that eventually, that transition kind of eventually lead you into oh, this is wow. I've choreographed, I've directed, dances.
Right.
Now I want to get into film. Is that kind of how that
Well,
transition went?
yeah, and then what I did is then after that, I started producing stage shows
Mm,
because, again, I could do it better. And I don't mean that in a stuck-up, arrogant way, but I saw a lot of shows where they were haphazard
mm,
and cheaply done.
mm.
And I came from my dance teacher in Cleveland. It was top notch, and there were the costumes. I mean, they were handmade. My grandmother made all the costumes for the guys because they didn't sell that many back then. And Dee was like, "Well, no, this needs blue fringe, so figure it out."
Mm.
So my grandma made the fringe, and
That's
but
cool.
and seeing the shows in New York, and I thought, well, this is a silly production that people are seeing. So
Sure.
I wanted to bring the Broadway level to Southern California. So I did Cinderella, and I met someone who used to work on a cruise ship, and they had ball gowns and stuff for one of their shows from years ago. Well, this guy was in charge of booking the shows there, so he got them to let us borrow their clothes. So
Mm.
my Cinderella dress was this ball gown with Swarovski, whatever that is, Swarovski crystals on,
Cross
and they
coast.
said, "This cost $14,000. If you
Ew.
mess it up, you will be paying for it." So I just made it work, and I wanted to present those.
Wow.
But I've realized that in my career, every 10 years I change. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I thought, after I choreographed and taught, I was at the conservatory for 10 years. And then I went producing shows and worked with, Carol Burnett, B. Arthur, um, Carol Channing, Dixie Carter, all these people, and plus doing like Cinderella and Alice in Wonderland and shows like that for kids. I wanted to be on the Carol Burnett show, and I thought, well,
Yeah.
you always wanted to be on film and television or work in it, not be on it, but work in it.
Sure.
And I was at the 10-year mark of doing this, and I thought, okay, I can just start from page one again and just repeat everything.
Mm.
And but is that going to be interesting and challenging?
Yeah.
I mean, I've done it. I've done everything I wanted to do in that business. So
Sure.
I said, okay, let's try film and television. And
Mm.
I still kept that job, but I decided to, use one of my vacation days. And I went to the first show I went to apply for was the Dr. Phil show,
Nice.
which I,
Yeah.
okay, we'll leave it at that. But
Show's a
it
show.
was
Show's a show.
exactly. I was trying to get my foot in the door.
Yeah.
And the girl that interviewed me was like 21, and this walks in his late 40s and is like, I'm here to be the travel coordinator, and she's looking at me and she looks at my resume, and it just lists all these shows that I've done, but I've done touring shows. I mean, I brought the Peking acrobats over, these kids, their visas, their school stuff, their parents. I booked
Yeah.
those flights. I brought Russian dancers over, and this was to handle the travel for the Dr. Phil show. And I said, "You don't think I can get a mom and dad that are fighting from Kansas? You don't think I can figure that out?"
That's the easy part. Yeah.
Yeah, and then but then the very next day I had an interview at Columbia Pictures, and they looked at me, and he
Wow.
said, you've done everything a producer does on your shows. Do you want to start here? Because you're going to have to start out as someone's assistant and learn how we do it.
Mm.
You're going to be you're going to be taking steps backwards. You're going to be learning because you're going to learn how to do it in the film industry, how to do it at Columbia Pictures, but you're going to be someone's assistant and you're going to have to listen to them. You're no longer the boss.
Yeah.
And I said yes. So it was interesting within a 2-day period how one person said, "You are not qualified to fly Betty and her daughter from Kansas." The one going, "Are you sure you want this job? You're overqualified."
Yeah.
And I, it, and that's
Fascinating.
a message that a lot of people need to hear, especially like you said with the social media and stuff. You hear this negative stuff, but be open to what's
Yeah,
coming your way. And when you're open to that, things
sure.
like this happen. And when Doug said that to me, I said, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there I was. And the first movie I worked on was House Bunny with Anna Faris. And it
Oh, it's a
was the
great
first,
movie.
oh, yeah.
That's such a good
And
movie.
it was from the table read all the way through the premiere.
Wow, that's great. And then now
Yeah.
here you are, just a few years later, and now you have this award-winning documentary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And when I decided to go out on my own, because like I said, I wanted to tell real stories.
yeah.
I I had a dream, and I had a dream about two girls that I taught, and they both had autism. And now this was 18 years ago, and I haven't thought about them. Why? What did I think about Fran and her daughters?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's a weird dream, and I didn't give it any more thought. And about 2 weeks later, I had the dream again, and I thought, this is God poking me. He's
Mm.
saying, "Here's your movie, asshole." Yeah, he's like, I'm giving it to you.
What are you waiting for? Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
And then I just researched and found in, studios all across America. And luckily the studio that I wanted to do actually is out here in California. I avoided California because I thought there's going to be no studio like this that teaches. I wanted to, my goal was, how do the arts help people in everyday life? Did your mom
Mhm.
and dad make you take piano lessons when you were 7? What did you learn from that you apply now? Because you're not a pianist or a
Sure.
violinist or singer. And that was my initial goal. And then I had the dream. So that was my way in. But I wanted to see how the discipline and the studying of that, how can people apply that in their everyday lives?
Mm.
So but then after that dream, and then I found Bonnie, I thought, you know what? This is it. There's kids with every developmental disability up there. The name of her school tells it, Ballet for All Kids. But she also has people that are typical that have no uh, neurological or disability. So you can look in the window and you would not know either way. It's
Right, because
just
it's
everyone is welcome.
just people
Everyone.
dancing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
is her school located out of California?
yeah, yeah,
It is?
she's up
Okay.
in the valley. Yeah, yeah. And I was just so lucky I that she let me in, and then the parents let me in because I went up there. I met with her 3 or 4 times, watched some of the classes before even filming, just so that the kids would get comfortable with me in
Mm,
the room. And then I started talking to some of the parents, and I
smart.
said, "This is my vision." I said, "What I wanna do is I want you to tell your stories. I don't want I did not want to present the kids, if that's the right word. I didn't want it to. I wanted to make sure, because I'm an able-bodied person, as they say, telling these stories. I wanted
Mhm.
to be the vessel, but them tell the stories so that we could learn something.
Sure.
How could I how could I learn the spectrum of autism?
Yeah.
But who better than having the mom and dad talk to me about it, or the mom talking to her son on the couch and the son having that honest conversation. And it was just me who steered the conversation and kept track of the film to put it together. But I didn't want to tell the stories. They needed to tell it so that I could learn, and hopefully others will learn, but also be entertained, because we're following them for 10 months on this journey from when the teacher says, we're going to do a recital, and the kids are like, to the actual recital at the end of the film. So you
Oh, that's
get
so
that in
cool.
there with all the home interviews and stuff in between.
Now, did you know that the recital was coming up when you were filming this? Did you guys talk about that, or was it kind of something that
Yeah.
organically happened?
Well, no, she said she was going to do a recital, and I go, did you make the announcement yet? She said, no, I'm going to do it next week. I'm like, oh my God. So I had to get
That's
my
great.
crew in like 6 days, and we went up there because I needed to capture. I said, well, then that's my film, her making
Yeah,
the announcement, and end it now with the recital. So that's what we did. But to be able
that's
to
cool.
hear her say it and how she was nervous, and then the kids, and then the anticipation and all that, and we do a countdown in the film of, you know 10 weeks, 8 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 days, 2
Yeah.
days, you know.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and it just it's kind of just hearing your story, it kind of radical because the title of the film, which I imagine maybe was some inspiration, is it's kind of full circle on your end,
100%.
right? Because I mean, if you coming from the dance world and now here you are on the other side of the camera, and it's almost like you're looking at everybody and it literally quite saying it, everybody can dance. It's
Right. Well,
what was that?
and
What was the inspiration of the title of the film? Was it something along those lines? Or?
yeah, I don't know where it popped into my head, where it came from, but the reality was, exactly what you said is, I was talking to, again, one of my phone calls with my mentor, Morgan Spurlock, and he said, Dan, there's nobody better to tell this film than you. You've lived it. You've
Hmm.
lived it. So he said, as a producer and director, you have insight that not many do, because you know what the teacher's going to be feeling in the middle
Mm,
of class. You know what it's going to be like when they're in rehearsal,
that's right.
when they get to the theater. Like, when you get to the movie and you see when we're in the theater,
Mhm.
I had 13 cameramen,
Oh wow.
because you get one chance, and
Yeah.
it's dress rehearsal, it's the day before, and you got to capture every story. So it's like, I need to follow these kids backstage. I need to get the parents. I need to get Bonnie on stage. Is
Yeah.
she going to panic? Is she going to lose it? Are they going to lose it? So there's just cameramen everywhere
Yeah.
to capture it. And then also the day of.
And you wouldn't know
So,
that if you weren't
right. And
immersed in the
also to
industry.
know to stay out of the way. Because when the
Mm,
kids are running into the wings, I told my cameraman, no, you need to get out of the way. So I also had to train them, and like in the studio, it was just on the shoulder camera, because as the kids danced, I wanted Ben to walk through the class and get out of their way. I promised the parents and Bonnie I would just be a fly on the wall, and I never wanted to disrupt it, because these parents are paying for these kids to take a class.
yeah.
I'm just observing, and I had to make sure. I wanted the movie to be shot that way and to tell the story that way, that we're over here watching this journey. And but it's also a journey that every child would go through.
Sure.
Just because in my film, Charlie has autism and she got nervous going on stage, well, so did my niece. People get nervous. My sister gets nervous going on stage, and her voice goes up 5 octaves, and she sounds like a
Sure.
chipmunk. Uh, well, I hope she doesn't watch this. Sorry, Deb.
Shout out Deb. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we all
So
do. Right?
it's
We all do.
yeah,
Once you, yeah, yeah,
yeah. So it's also all of that, and to me, it's the movie also shows the similarities of how, you know um, the arts are a great equalizer,
mm, true.
and that
Yeah,
this was just kids coming together, learning to dance to put on a show. That's it.
that's it.
There's
Yeah.
these there's these other parts of their personalities that we are exposed to,
Hmm.
and um and the parents were so gracious to let me in to experience that. But you know we all we're all the same, hence
Yeah.
everybody dance.
Yeah. I love it. It fits perfectly, and I think it reminded me of what you just said in particular. It reminded me of a speech that Ethan Hawke gave a few years back, where he was talking about creativity,
Hmm.
and he goes, creativity and being an artist, you don't think it matters until it does. Of course, I'm
Right.
paraphrasing, but he says, you don't think about poetry at all on a daily basis until you lose a loved one,
Right.
and then you think about poetry. So he
Right.
goes, creativity like that and artistry like that, whether it's dance, whether it's music, whether it's podcasting or filming, it's vital to us because there is somebody out there that needs it. And I think with your film, what's beautiful about it is I can't wait to watch it. I'll message you as soon as I get done tonight watching it. But my wife, she comes from ballet, she comes from dance, so we're very excited about watching this film, mainly because the artistry itself of dance as a whole, it tells so many stories, as I'm sure you know. Whether
Right.
that's in the physical form, what you feel as the viewer, the person actually dancing, the expression, and whether similar to like how I was involved in sports as a kid, from what my wife tells me when she was dancing, was when you're on that stage, there's a moment where you realize you're on the stage. After that, nothing
Right.
matters. It's internally this switch that hits you where it's like you're releasing, whether that's anger or happiness or feeling. It's this expression, this artistry of your creativity is literally oozing into the crowd. But as you're doing it, you don't realize it. And then on the other
Then you
side,
walk off stage and you panic, and you're like,
that's right.
"Did I do it?"
Did I do it? It's almost like she always used to tell me, it's like you black out almost. Like
Yeah.
you come back down to reality. But here we are as the viewer or someone watching this film where you look at it, oh, it's people dancing. This is beautiful. This is great. But you don't realize how important it is, that art form, until you're on that side and you start
Right.
watching it. So it's fascinating where you can relate that to a lot of other things. And I think circling back to what we discussed earlier is if you love dance, you don't know that until you try it. And I think it is important that you throw things up against the wall through the course of your teenage years and your 20s and 30s. Just see what sticks. Try
Right.
out everything and then hone in those skills and really focus on something that you're passionate about. And then try to stick with that long term if you can in a career or whatever. So
Well,
it's
and also, and because I've talked at colleges and stuff like that, when they go, "You left Simon Cowell?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and they're like, "Huh?"
what are you
You know?
thinking? Yeah.
And by the way, he's an amazing boss. But it's too, I'm still on the same path, career path. It's just it's gone left, it's gone right, it's hit a cul-de-sac, it's hit a dead end,
Yeah.
it's done a U-turn,
Sure.
it's gone everywhere,
Hmm.
but it keeps me excited and it keeps me moving forward, but I also think when you can be open to that,
Mm.
and, like, again, when I had that dream, first of all, I don't remember my dreams, and these was so vivid, you need to be open and aware to things like that.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
one of the things when I was filming that happened was, you'll see in the movie there's a girl by the name of Breezy, and I wasn't following her story in the beginning. I was following 13 or 14 people, and we narrowed it down to 5, and then we added in Breezy, because when she got on stage, her smile was infectious. And she was having the time of her life, and Bonnie, the teacher, knew this, and she was front and center so that the other kids could follow her, and the love and the joy oozed out of her, that I then talked to her mom and said, "Can we interview you? Can we talk to you and Breezy at home?" Where the other ones I did along the way, but to see how dance and art
Mm.
lifted her up, excuse me, and just she was having the time of her life. I thought, this is what the movie is about. So then I had to go back, but I had to be open to that, to see that when I'm watching it on my computer, make cuts for my editor, and went, "Oh my God, look at that beam of sunshine,"
Yeah. You had to
coming
include
out
it.
of her, to then say, I need to add her
Yeah. You
and
have to.
tell
Yeah.
her story, to then film that afterwards,
Wow.
um
That's great.
but just be aware, and I think you're like that. I think from the videos that I've seen, in the podcasts that I've watched, I think that,
I try to be.
yeah, and there's times we're not. There's times we're stubborn
Yeah.
SOBs,
Of
but,
course. Of course. Yeah.
you
And I
know,
think you need a little bit of that too.
yeah,
Yeah, but I've realized over the years, I mean, I think this might be episode 227 or 28. And I mean, the first 100, it was just me wanting to vent and to talk to people and, wasn't necessarily to collaborate or, or find like-minded individuals or even really just learn new things. But these last couple of years, it's kind of, my podcast has evolved into The only reason I like doing it now is to chat with someone like yourself, because I would never, um, dance would never be a part of my life. But whether it's your film or someone else I talk to that's a nutritionist, or someone else that is an actor, it's being objective and learning new things all the time. It opens you up to so many things. It's like this vine of crazy things that can happen, and whether that is in your case of watching the film and then, oh, well, maybe we should include dance in our life more. Maybe we should do this because my wife is always trying to get back into in some capacity. And it's just, again, it's always just trying to learn new things. And that is what I try to do now, is have people on that I can learn from, like yourself, and you could share your message with my audience, and then vice versa too. I mean, again, just me learning things and learning new things all the time, and kind of evolving myself, because there is so much cool shit out there. And sometimes if you stick in that lane of one thing, you miss out on a lot of other stuff. And that's one thing I've realized, talking to all my guests, is just I'm learning new things all the time. It's really, really cool to see everything that's happening. There's so much cool shit out there,
Well, and also I think in my movie, the one thing that I learned about, it was about 3 months into it, um, is I learned about um, the neurodivergent and the developmental
Mm,
disabled community. And, and I'll tell you when a switch flipped in my head.
mm,
And I'm hoping if I can do this for one or two other people in the audience, then I've done my job. I was at Target doing my last minute Christmas shopping, getting stuffers. And we started like the last week of September filming. So it was December. And I'm walking down the one of the aisles, and there was a girl on the floor having a tantrum. And I walked by her and I thought, oh, I wonder if she's on the spectrum. And I just kept shopping.
mhm.
And I got in my car and I started to cry. It hit me. I didn't go, what a rotten kid. My mind didn't, my old way of thinking, I didn't go, well, that's a horrible mother. Why don't you pick up your
Oh,
kid and handle this? I went, oh, I wonder if she's on the spectrum, because I don't know their story.
yeah,
And I started to cry and I said, this is what I want my movie to do, is it to open and show awareness, to give you, I have the opportunity to sit in these people's lives, in their houses, and give their bird's eye view
mhm,
of what their daily life, what their routine is like.
yeah,
And it may be different than ours, it may not, but
right.
what tools, what could my audience take away from that? And if someone sees that and recognizes that
Yeah,
and thinks that way, then I did my job,
you've
because
done
it
it. Yeah,
happened to me just because I was up there every weekend.
yeah,
So it, being around it, flipped my switch and
yeah.
widened my horizons and my outlook and my way of thinking.
And now you have more empathy on the subject, and you understand a little bit more. And
Yeah,
yeah,
and we we're all trained in in certain ways to believe on anything,
right.
um, and society and
Doesn't help.
movies and TV shows it a certain way.
Sure. Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
and if you're only shown it in through certain lenses,
Right.
you're narrowing exactly what you said. Then you're narrowing your viewpoints
That's
when
right.
if you see it through this lens and this lens, and this person talk about it and that person, oh, then
Yeah.
you're open to
Other
more and
interpretations. And
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer. I just, before we started recording here, I chat with this guy Anthony, who's a political comedian. Uh, far He's far right, but what's fascinating about him is he makes light of the situation, and we talk a lot about objective style thinking and middle ground and thing. But I always have this conversation with other friends that are more on the left side or right side, doesn't matter. But it's what you mentioned is kind of very similar on the political side, where if you're going to watch CNN, watch Fox as well.
Mhm.
Maybe watch independent news journalisms as well, because sometimes, whether it's mass media or social media, you get fed what you like. And
Right.
if you like only one side, you're not going to get fed that other side. So you don't really know what that other side is. So you don't have to believe in that other side, but it's okay to hear both sides and then come up with your own conclusion using critical thinking skills and try to figure it out. And again, that you have to do that with everything, whether that is
Right.
film or reading books or fiction, nonfiction, policies. I mean, there's so many things that I think we need to get out of our comfort zone a little bit.
Mhm.
And again, I think that is hard nowadays because the way social media does work is it's all based off algorithms of what you like.
Right.
So unfortunately, and I know this firsthand because I never shop for baby things, but
Oh, no.
my wife does, and our accounts are linked. So I get served ads constantly from shit she's clicking. So every
Right.
time I get this ad, I'm like, what are you doing? Are you searching this company? She's like, oops. I'm like, okay. But
Yeah.
what's interesting about it is now I get served videos of like moms that have parental advice. So it's kind of a
Uh-huh.
good thing. So at first I was kind of like, but then now I'm kind of like, all right, cool. Now I'm, her feed is kind of transferring to my feed a little bit.
Right.
And her parent feeds now I'm starting to see, and it's like, all right, I'm kind of learning something now. So it's sometimes it forces us to get into it, but I think we have to be proactive and, kind of reach different things because it's going to make us
Right.
better. So,
Yeah.
but listen, I can't believe we're already at an hour. That flew by.
Yikes.
But I do want to. I can't wait to watch your film. We're gonna watch it tonight. I'm gonna message you, and I'll let you know what I think, and I'll of course share it with the audience. But if you can, let everybody know where they can find it. I kind of put it in the beginning, and I'll leave everything in the description below. But where can people find the film? What do you got going on? Any websites you want to shout out? All that stuff.
Okay, well, the film actually, because March is Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month, it's actually free this month on Prime Video
Hmm.
and on Tubi, but it's also available on Apple TV and Google Play. Uh, but you have to pay there. So if you have Amazon Prime, you might as well get it for free this month. They might even extend it a month, but who knows? But in support of that, you can watch it for free there.
That's great. Yeah, that's where I'm
Yeah.
gonna watch it. Yeah.
And there's a family thing that you might need in the future. There's a website called Common Sense Media, and
Hmm.
they rate all TV shows and movies. And
Really?
yeah, so that parents and they break it down by age and what's appropriate and all that kind of stuff. And they actually gave us a five-star rating, the highest, and a blue ribbon. And we were then selected as one of the top documentaries on Apple TV. And I'm like, when did
Wow.
this happen? You
Yeah.
know? You know?
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
so that
amazing.
just came out. Yeah, they just posted that like yesterday, and I'm like, "Well, thank you guys very much."
Oh, that's great.
You know?
All right.
Yeah,
Everybody give Dan and everybody who worked on the film
thank you.
a
Yeah,
round of
as
applause.
I work alone in my little office, as you know,
Yes.
very rarely do we get the pat on the back.
I know. It's always good to get that satisfaction, especially when you're stuck in these four walls. It gets claustrophobic sometimes. But
Oh,
well, Dan, listen, I appreciate everything that you've done. Thank you for taking the time to come on the show. I'm a little behind on my podcast, but I'm definitely going to get this out by next week, so that way people can have a couple weeks to watch the film for free. And then, of course, I'll leave all of your social media handles and the website and all that stuff in the description below. So thank you so much for the time. Looking forward to the film, and I can't wait to see what we come up with next. But just thanks again for coming on.
yeah, and thank you. Thank you for your podcast. I love it.
I appreciate you, Dan. All right, man. We'll talk soon.